project. So what are the objectives of our research methodology module? We want you to understand the modalities of medical research. You will also understand the levels of evidence for evidence-based medicine. Now, all of you know that we are supposed to be following evidence-based medicine. So I hope you will understand a little bit more about this once we have completed this module. You will also understand what are the concepts of systematic review and meta-analysis when you understand the levels of evidence. We will also teach you how to write a research protocol and then to carry out a minor research project. And then I hope that you will learn how to critically review a published paper. Now, these skills are very important, especially when you want to do post-graduation and you will be expected to complete a thesis for the purpose of your postgraduate studies. We hope that this exposure to research methodology will help you as you progress in your academic career. So let's begin with what is research. So research is a systematic collection, analysis, and interpretation of data to answer a certain question or solve a problem. Now, for most of you who remember what is biostatistics, you will remember that biostatistics is also a systematic collection analysis, but you would see that it did not have to answer a certain question or solve a problem. So when we carry out research, it's important that you have good knowledge of epidemiology, because epidemiology will tell you about what are the study designs, and also biostatistics, because that will help you how to analyze your data and interpret your data. So what is very important when we carry out research is that what is your research question? It is the research question will determine your research methodology. When we look at
Ma'am, your mic is mute.
Okay, is that better?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so was I mute all throughout?
No, ma'am, from the research question.
All right, thank you. So the research question is very important because it is your research question will determine your research methodology. Okay, so what is your research question? Once you have a research question, then you can choose what is an appropriate study design. Then you design your pro forma, how you're going to collect your data, and then you will do data analysis, and then you will interpret your results. Okay, so that is an important process. So we have to remember that when we carry out research, that we're doing it as a part of the health system. And we have to recognize that our health system is a part of the cultural system. And so we have many modalities of health system. So there is pluralism in medical health care. Okay, there are many modalities, okay, of carrying out research. We also have to understand that in a health system, the people, okay, for whom the health care is being provided, that they have a particular health seeking behavior. Okay, so as you know that we have rolled out, there is vaccine which is available, but many people are not coming forward to take that vaccine because of doubts regarding the vaccine. So health seeking behavior also plays an important part in the way people access your health care. Okay, so community participation is another very important part of healthcare, and especially in chronic diseases, self-care is also important for a person who is suffering either from hypertension or diabetes or cardiovascular disease. Okay, so we realize that there are many aspects that we can, these are just a few ways in which we can analyze and look at research to improve our understanding of the health system. Now, okay, so I'll just very briefly tell you about research, because philosophy of research can be a class by itself, but I just want to introduce just the concept that whenever we carry out research, whether it's quantitative research or qualitative research, it has a reasoning or thinking behind it. Okay, so that's called as the philosophy of research. So philosophical paradigms, they are identified on the basis of the answer to three questions which identify basic beliefs. Okay, so when you hear the word ontology, ontology explores the nature of reality. Okay, so philosophers have thought, okay, what is reality? Okay, so when you're thinking and trying to understand what is reality, what is the nature of reality, because in research you're trying to find something, that is called as ontology. Then you have another word called as epistemology. So in epistemology, we try to know what is the nature of the relationship between the knower, the person who's carrying out research, and the known or something that you're trying to acquire knowledge about. Okay, research methodology is how should the inquirer or the researcher go about finding this knowledge. Yeah, again, is it muted?
No, ma'am.
Not able to hear?
We can hear you, ma'am.
All right, somebody had a question. Were you talking to someone, Prashansa? Okay, all right. No problem with my end, right?
Yes, ma'am, no problem.
Okay, thank you. All right. Okay, so just remember there are some things known as, we also try to explore what is the nature of reality, what is the relationship between the knower and the known, so that also determines your methodology. Okay, so in quantitative we try to remain objective. Okay, relationship between the person who's carrying out the research and your participants, or you're trying to find out the question, we remain objective. Okay, that's what, and we are trying to measure things while remaining objective. In qualitative studies, the researcher becomes a part of the process. You know, they go and live with the people whom they're trying to carry, and so they empathize, and therefore they use different kinds of tools. Okay, they're not really interested in what is your sample size and things like that. Okay, in quantitative research, we want to know, oh, what is sample size, how do we measure it, what tools are there, what are your outputs going to be. Okay, so we're very interested in what are the input and the output as well. Okay, so in research methodology, we want you to understand how the researcher should go about finding out this knowledge. Okay, so the answer to these three questions, what is the nature of reality, what is the nature of the relationship between the knower and the known, and how should you go about finding out knowledge, when you have the answers to these three things, then you know what is the approach that you should be adopting, whether you want to do a quantitative study or whether you want to carry out a qualitative study. So let's understand some terms. What is real, what is actual, and what is empirical? Okay. So when you talk about what is real, what is reality, we are talking about the causal structures and mechanisms which have enduring properties. Okay. And then you have something which is the actual. So actual is the events or the non-events which are generated by the real. Now these may or may not be observed. And then you have empirical. So when we talk about empirical evidence, these are events that are actually observed or experienced. Okay, so when you hear the word empirical, that means something that has been actually observed. The actual consists of events and non-events which are generated by the real, and then you can see the reality. So reality is very large, and when you carry out reality, from your trying to do it from what you can observe, right? You're just looking at empirical. So this shows you that when we use a sample to try to get what is the evidence, you can see that you're only doing a small part of what is the actual. Okay, so this is just to give you a framework to understand things in which we carry out research. Okay, now we come to what we normally carry out as doctors. What we usually do is quantitative research. Okay, so quantitative research is an approach for testing objective theories by examining the relationship among variables. So we have objectivity. Okay, we don't interact with the participants. Okay, in the sense that we don't become part of them and try to understand what we're doing. We are trying to measure. So we remain objective. Okay, so it is an approach for testing objective theories by examining relationship among variables. These variables in turn can be measured typically on instruments so that number data can be analyzed using statistical procedures. Okay, so when you prepare your final report, it has a structure, and this set structure consists of an introduction. So you have a literature review, literature and theory. You give a little bit of understanding. This is how you will do. Then you have the methods section in which you describe how you went about and did this research. Then you have the results section under which you write what you found. And then based on what you find and looking at the literature that you have looked at previously and then you continue to look at, then you write a discussion. So that whether you are adding anything new to what is already known or what you already found has already been known. Okay, so then you write a discussion. So typically this is the IMRAD format in which we write a paper: introduction, methods, results, and discussion. So these are some philosophies which are there in quantitative research, positivism, post-positivism. You do not go too much into it. So in the quantitative approach to research, we have deductive reasoning, which is favored. Okay. Now, why we adopt this positivism is scientists adopt this because you want to circumvent religious beliefs and faith, which cannot be measured. Okay. Religious beliefs and faith, they are not a measurable phenomenon. So while religious beliefs and faith are very important part, because we cannot measure it, therefore deductive reasoning is used in scientific research. Then there's also something, now we've learned that our research philosophy is based on research paradigms. Okay, so what is a paradigm? A paradigm helps to define boundaries. So you have a set of rules and regulations, and these act as a framework for acceptable behavior. So scientific paradigms can be described as scientific practice that includes laws, theory, application, and instrumentation that provide models from which coherent research can spring. Okay, so that's a paradigm. So a paradigm shift is when it represents the loss of influence of one paradigm to another paradigm. So there is one set pattern of thinking, rules and laws and framework under which we are working. When there is a change in this paradigm and you start begin thinking in another way, that's called as a paradigm shift. So what is this hypothetical deductive approach? So what we taught you in epidemiology is the hypothetical deductive approach. So the epidemiological method of reasoning is to determine whether there is any association between two variables. Okay, we did a class on association and causation when you were in the 4th semester, and I will be taking one for your colleagues in the current 4th semester tomorrow. Okay, so association and causation. Is there an association? Is there a direct association? Is there an indirect association? Is this a causal association or is it a spurious association? Okay, so we want to see if there is an association between two variables. If there is an evidence of an association, then we want to see whether this can be a causal association. Can we ascribe that condition to this particular factor? Okay, then what we do is we formulate a hypothesis. So the formulation of a hypothesis through reasoning would be the logical step. Once you formulate a hypothesis, and most of these hypotheses are generated through descriptive studies. Okay, once you have some hypotheses which are generated, then what we do is we go ahead to test the hypothesis. So the testing of the hypothesis is always through comparison. You cannot have testing of hypothesis in a descriptive study because you don't have a comparison group. Okay, so when you test your hypothesis through comparisons, it can yield information on the validity of your hypothesis. So whether what you're saying is correct or not. So either you accept your hypothesis or you reject your hypothesis. How do we do that? Statistical methods are then used to rule out the role of chance. So your p-value, when you say p-value is significant, what you're saying is that this is not most likely because of a real association rather than because of chance. So what your statistical test will, this is not chance, it rules out the role of chance, and then you can either accept or reject the null hypothesis. So also you always begin with the null hypothesis, which says that there is no association. And then what happens is, okay, you have enough evidence to either accept your null hypothesis or you have enough of evidence to reject your null hypothesis. So hypothesis testing always revolves around the null hypothesis. And your research question is what forms your research hypothesis. Okay. So this is the deductive approach. Okay, so you start out with a particular, you start out from your theoretical knowledge, understanding, you formulate a hypothesis, then you go and carry out some observation. This should be in this mode, right? So you start out with a theory, with a hypothesis, then you carry out observation, you do your data collection, and then you see whether your results match up with your theory and theoretical understanding on your hypothesis. Okay, but what we always need to remember is that human beings are complex and they are not entirely predictable. Okay, so 2 and 2 is not always 4 in when you're looking at health system research. So this premise forms the basis for the interpretive or the inductive school of thought. So what we saw was the deductive. So quantitative research is all about deductive. Okay, so you start with your theory, you do hypothesis, you test your hypothesis, and then you come out yes or no. Okay, but remember, it's always not like that. So there are interpretive or inductive school of thought, and that introduces the platform for your qualitative research. Okay, so I hope you're understanding that when we carry out research, you have a research question, you have to choose a research methodology, and then you can choose either to carry out a quantitative research or you can now look at a qualitative research. So what is qualitative research? Qualitative research is a means for exploring and understanding the meaning of that individuals or groups they ascribe to a social or human problem. The process of research involves emerging questions and procedure. They collect data in the participant setting. You analyze the data inductively. You build from particulars to generic themes, and you make interpretations of the meaning of data. So what the final report, it has a flexible writing structure, unlike our reports which we write, which has typically an introduction, a little bit brief description of the literature, then you have the methodology, then we have results and discussion. So qualitative research, their report has a little flexible writing structure. So the philosophical origins of a qualitative research, okay, they have two paradigms. One is a constructionist and one is a transformative. Okay, so those of who are interested more in research, you can read this forward. I just put this here to stimulate your own reading. Okay, so whether you want to go ahead and read a little more about research, but given constraints of time and the amount of covering that you have, I will not go into the details, and neither is it a part of your curriculum. Okay. So the inductive approach, what it typically does is that you begin with observations. Okay, so this is something that not just social scientists can do, but even we as doctors. Okay, so when you're in the community or when in the ward and when you see something, okay, so something that we had seen in our thing was women normally, when you know that during pregnancy you do have pedal edema. Okay, so when you find that somebody doesn't have too much of pedal edema, then you ask what they do, and you will find that they give you an answer. Oh, I drink this particular thing. Okay, I boil barley and I drink this water. Or my mother told me, my grandmother told me that. Okay, so you find something that when people are doing something and you find there is a decrease in the thing. So you have an observation. Okay, you find somebody telling you something, then you see a pattern, and then you put together a hypothesis. Okay, so this is the inductive approach, where you start with observation, you see a pattern, and then you develop a hypothesis which can lead you to formulate a new theory or a new understanding. So this is the inductive approach which begins when you begin to work. Okay. So you have inductive, deductive research. So what's the difference? Okay, like the arrow point is pointing to you, your typical qualitative research begins from bottom and goes up. Okay, so it starts with observation and goes towards theory, while the deductive approach begins with a theory hypothesis and then goes to test the hypothesis. So the qualitative research methodology, it is inductive in nature. You generate patterns of observations, then you construct a hypothesis, and it is very subjective. Okay, quantitative research methodology is usually deductive in nature. You verify a hypothesis, then you enumerate your observations or findings, and it is objective in nature. Okay, so I hope you can see what is the contrast between qualitative and quantitative research. Okay, so in qualitative research, we are not focused on sample size and numbers and statistics. So we use a small sample size, you use it to generate hypothesis. Okay, it has a limited generalized. That means whatever findings you get from your study, because it is so qualitative in nature, it is very much, restricted to the sample that you have taken, okay, to the people that you have surveyed. So you cannot just take it and generalize it to everyone, okay, but you have the results are very credible. Okay, so there is credibility associated because you've gone into depths. And a qualitative research is more process oriented. Okay, in quantitative research methods, we are interested in a sample size. Are you taking an appropriate sample size for the data? So if you want to study hypertension or diabetes, you have to know what is the prevalence of hypertension in the community or diabetes in the community, and then you use that to calculate an appropriate sample size so that when you carry out a study, you have enough numbers that are giving you that are representative of your population. Okay, so representativeness is very important, and therefore you take a larger sample size. Okay, you don't work with small numbers, and then you can go ahead to do a hypothesis testing where you have two groups. So you have a group which has the condition. So if you want to look at hypertension, you have a group of people who have hypertension, and then if you have a group of people who do not have hypertension, and then you try to see what is the difference between these two groups and why are these people having hypertension and why do these people not have hypertension. So you're trying to see what are the risk factors for those who have hypertension. You can also see what are the factors which are protecting the persons who don't have hypertension. Okay, or is it just a little bit of time, or you sometimes find they have similar. So is there a risk factor? Is there any causal association or not? So it really gives you an insight into risk factors as well as protective factors. Okay, so what are they doing? Are they more physically active? Okay, they don't have a family history. Okay, are they a younger group and these are older? So that would be a confounding bias that you have. So, okay, when you take a large sample size, when you have a comparison group, you can carry out hypothesis testing. And now because you're using such rigorous methods, okay, for your study, these studies are more generalizable. Okay, you can take these results and you can extrapolate them to another population. Okay, so a very important part of quantitative studies is we focus on the validity of your study. Okay, what is the sensitivity, specificity, if you're looking at a screening tool. Okay, if you're looking at I think, can you repeat this process? Okay, you're looking at validity. And so quantitative studies are focused on the outcomes. They're very much outcome oriented rather than the process oriented, which you find in qualitative studies. All right. Now, so sometimes what happens is social scientists, they tend to use a lot of qualitative research methods, and medical profession tend to use a lot of quantitative research methods. So what is better, quantitative or qualitative, and in what order? So preferably you should do a qualitative study before you carry out a quantitative study to discover what is the most important issues. So now we are, as medical researchers, we are trying to understand and bring qualitative methods into our study, and we call that as mixed methods. So we use a little bit of qualitative study, like we do a focus group discussion, as well as we try to see what's the prevalence, what are the numbers, comparison, are people who are more obese more likely to develop, so that is what you can look at. So we try to use a combination of qualitative as well as quantitative. So preferably qualitative before quantitative, so you can understand what is the most important issue. And then qualitative methods can be used to explore or describe or explain the findings of a quantitative study. We can use qualitative methods to study perceptions, preferences, experiences, or beliefs. Okay, so remember we said that faith is something that you can't measure. Okay, and so in quantitative study, how will you put it? But you can use that to understand that you can use a qualitative method. Okay, just to make you understand what is the difference between quantitative and qualitative. Okay, so this is a researcher. What they've done is put a vehicle with ice cream. Okay, this is typically a cart that carries ice cream, and they put a board saying there free ice cream. And so the researcher is hiding behind and watching how many people are taking free ice cream. So he says, oh, only 1 in 30 take free ice cream. Okay, so that's quantitative because you're measuring how many people are taking. Now, qualitative methods, if you go and ask them, what did you feel when you saw the free ice cream? Okay, why did you take it? Okay, when maybe you go and ask somebody else, there's free ice cream there, why are you not taking it? That would be a qualitative method. Okay, when you're trying to ask about emotions and things like that, you really can't measure. And here you're just looking at numbers. Okay, so that's quantitative and qualitative methods. So when we talk about the methods, okay, what do we have for qualitative? You can have case studies. Okay, for case studies, you can use a guideline, you can have structured format, a conceptual framework. Okay, and case studies, typically one very famous case study qualitative has been the girl who went and interviewed Charles Sobraj, and she actually ended up marrying him. Okay, because she was so influenced by what he had to say. Okay, that's an in-depth case study. Okay, so you have case studies. Then you can have focus group discussions. Now, all of this will be taken for you in a separate class on qualitative methods. Okay, I'm just introducing this to you. You can have an in-depth interview. You can have case studies. You can have participant observation. Okay. The quantitative methods are surveys, census. You can either, if your literacy of your participants is more, you can ask them to have a self-administer. You can give them the survey and they can fill it out. Otherwise, the interviewer can administer the questionnaire and they can ask the question. So you can have a structured, semi-structured interview. You can have a questionnaire. Okay, you can have a systematic review. You can have observation, you can have meta-analysis, you can have secondary data review. Okay, so you can either have a primary source of data. Primary research is where we carry out research by ourselves. Secondary data is when you have data which is already there with you, existing, and you take it out and you look at health records. You can go to the medical record section and pull out records and you carry out data. That would be a secondary data. Okay. So mixed methods research, like I told you, is the use of quantitative and qualitative methods in a single study or a series of studies. So this is an emerging type of research methodology, and now this is being favored by health researchers within the health services research. Okay, now let me just take and see what is the time. So I get an idea and see. Okay. So what's the time like now in Kathmandu?
Ma'am, it's 9:58.
9:58. Oh, great. So I have another half an hour, right? Okay. Great. Thank you. Okay, so now you understand study designs, hopefully, right? After having looked at epidemiology, studied it as a whole module, at least you understand what is a study design, okay? So study design is a specific plan or protocol for conducting research, and this allows the investigator to translate the conceptual hypothesis into an operational one. So broadly in health system, we classify study designs as observational and experimental. Again, this will be taken for you again because you have a lot to study and you may not remember everything. So a separate class will be taken for you on study designs. Now, remember we said that whenever we carry out health research, it is a large field. Okay, so when we look at the health sciences and see their complementary relationship, this shows you the focus of the research. Okay, so research you can carry out in biological sciences, you can do it in clinical science, you can do clinical epidemiology, you can do public health epidemiology, you can also study health services. Okay, this is the whole gamut of research that you can do in the health sciences. So when we talk about research in biological sciences, the primary focus is on animal models. We're looking at cells, we're looking at transmitters, molecules, genes, and drug development. These are all the researchers who get all your Nobel Prizes, okay? Okay, like Watson and Crick who discovered, okay, the shape of your DNA, okay, the helical structure, okay, looking at transmitters, cells, molecules, so physiology, okay, plays a very important role in your pharmacology. So all your basic sciences, they will go into that, okay, basic sciences in medicine. Then you have clinical sciences. So it's very important, and let me remind you once again, when we talk about clinical medicine and epidemiology, okay, clinical sciences refers to individual patient. Epidemiology refers to populations. Okay, so when you carry out research among individual patients, that will be a clinical research. When you carry out research among populations, that is epidemiology. Okay, now you can see there's a bridge between the two, which we call as clinical epidemiology. When you use population methods, now most of the methods that we use, okay, a case study, a case control study, a cohort study, okay, these are all epidemiological methods. When we use population methods to answer individual patient questions, that is clinical epidemiology. And that is an old name for what is today called as evidence-based medicine. All your evidence-based medicine is coming from the clinical epidemiological studies, okay? Then another area of research is the health services, where healthcare systems, you look at how is healthcare provided, what is the accessibility of people, okay, what is the availability of these resources, how many doctors you have per population, for the population, how many nurses do you have, okay, when you're looking at health services, that is called as the, when your focus is the healthcare system, then that is called as health services research, okay, and all of these are important for us to provide good care for the patients or the populations. Okay, this is how Epidemiological studies are divided, observational studies and experimental studies. Okay, so now you have this research onion. Okay, so you have a research philosophy which drives you and to understand what is reality. Then you have a research approach, whether you want to use a deductive approach or you want to use an inductive approach. Okay, once you've decided what is your approach, then you take what is your strategy. Okay, do you want to carry out? Okay, do you want to have a case study, a grounded theory, you want to do an action research study, you want to carry out a survey, you want to carry out an experiment. Okay, then you look at what is your data, what is your time horizon. Do you want to do a cross-sectional study or do you want to do a longitudinal study? And then what is your data collection method? Okay, do you want to do take a sample and do primary research? You want to do secondary data? You want to do an actual observation, or you want to do interviews, or you want to use questionnaires? Okay, so this is the research onion and how in which we progress. Okay, this is just to give you the large picture. Now we come to this very important thing, because we are going to make you write a research protocol and we're going to make you carry out mini research. Now what happens most often is a few of you are very enthusiastic of research and the others sleep. So even within a group, you will see if you have 15 people in your group, you'll have 5 people who do actually, typically that's how it works. 5 people who actively do the work and 10 people who just write along with you. Okay, so hopefully as you go through this theory, I hope that we can stimulate your interest for research, whether it is because you want to go abroad and you want to have your CV, whether you want to enhance your CV, or whether you want to actually gain experience, whatever may be your motivation. I hope that this module will at least stimulate interest for whatever and motivate you to carry out research. Okay, so now I come to the part of which just to try to help you to understand what is a research question. Okay, just excuse me just a minute. I have a call coming and I'll just take it off. Hi, Sil, I'm in the middle of a class. Can I call you back? Give me half an hour. Okay, I'm taking a class after half an hour. All right, thank you. Okay, now this is an actual thing. Okay, funny, it may sound very funny, but the collective opinion of a number of expert referees of some of the most esteemed international medical journals, whether it be Lancet or BMJ, okay, or the American Journal of Epidemiology. There are so many journals that are really, really esteemed. In almost half of the research articles that they get for reviewing, the authors did not seem to be clear as to what they wanted to do. Okay, so what you see is you see a paper. That's what mostly how research happens. You see someone carrying out a research, they bring that research, they look at it as a guide, and then they follow and do their research. But hopefully that is not what you all will do. I hope you will be able to see what are the flaws in that particular research, or what are the good, the good parts of that research, and then you will adopt the good parts. Okay, leave out the flaws and help to improve your own research. Okay, and I hope that when you carry out research, you will know what you want to do. So it's very important that we should be clear as to what we want to do. So the first building block is your research question. The first stepping stone in any effective medical research is to develop a proper research question. An appropriate research question is developed after a fair amount of academic reading and discussion. Okay, so you have to read, and that's what we call as the literature review. Before you begin any research, you just start with a broad topic. Okay, developing an epidemiological or research question is essentially an academic exercise, and you have a series of steps. So we're trying to break this down for you. Okay, how do you develop a research question? Now, this first thing I'm going to tell you is that the research question should not be forced upon you. Okay, but I must say at this point of time that because we are trying to teach you research, and because you're going to do it within a community, we are going to suggest these topics to make it easy for you. It's not going to be forced upon you, but we will give you a broad area in which you can work. And I hope that you will come up with the research question. Okay, so we are not going to force the research question upon you, but we will suggest the broad areas that you will need to look up. And what I will suggest for you now is that because we have only allotted one family for each of you, earlier we would allot 2 families given the current COVID context. So what I would do is that focus on quality of your study. I'm not saying do a qualitative study, And what I am thinking is that let's look at among the age groups. So I think some of you may look at the under 5 children, a group of you look at adolescents, some of you look at adults, some of you look at the reproductive health, another group can look at a particular disease, morbidity, some of you can look at hypertension, some can look at diabetes, and then also the geriatric. So I am hoping that since you have come to us in groups of 8 for postings, that we should have at least 8 groups. Okay, in the last class we kept to 5 groups so that we could, the mentors and the students could get comfortable with it. This time I'm hoping to reduce the number of students so that we are able to allow more interaction between the teacher and mentor and the group. Okay, so we will give you a broad area and then we will allow you to come up with the research question. Okay, so I'll give you a broad area, like look at age group, or maybe let's look at this, let's look at visual, let's look at, you know, among the geriatric, let's look at visual, or look at visual problems in the whole group. So I'll just give you broad areas that we will suggest. And again, we're looking for interaction from you. You probably have more ideas than we have. Okay, but we will not force the research question. We'll just give you broad topics. Okay. Why is this important? If we take up research work which does not genuinely interest us, we will not plan and design it and conduct it half-heartedly. Okay, so we are here to help you through it. We will teach you how to do, how to carry out, design it, make a protocol. Okay, so we are here to help you. Okay, sometimes you may not be initially interested in a particular research area, but before you may reject it, if you read up something, you may start getting interested. Okay, because you can read. So it's very important that we read. Okay. The next is to find a general area of interest. So this is where we will help you. We will give you that broad area and we will give you that area of interest. Okay. So whether, okay, I've just given you. So our own interest, clinical observations, discussion with your colleagues, questions asked by students and subordinates. In my own research, when I've been carrying out research, my interest has been propelled by things that I've interacted with, my observations in the community. Okay, so they have helped. Okay, when I've gone to a conference or when I've done, you know, further learning. Okay, when I've gone on to do another master's or gone on to do. Okay, so what your interest is, whatever you learn, that will be a good area. Okay, so you develop by finding an area of interest, and that we will help you with. We'll give you broad topics. Okay, so now once we give you that topic, what you need to do is you read around that topic. Okay, once a general area of interest has been identified, you need to do a wide, extensive study. Okay, care needs to be taken at this stage not to make a very in-depth one. You just do a wide one. Okay, so initially when you're writing a protocol, you write a very wide, you do a wide kind of a study. Now this purpose is achieved by you first browse through books, you go through articles, abstracts of articles. In the last 3 to 5 years, you look at, so when you do your search, you know, and when there is a class on literature review, he will, Dr. Nishwal will actually tell you how to carry out that literature review and that how to do that search. Okay, so best way is to look at whatever articles have been published around that topic in the last 3 to 5 years. So you look at the abstracts. Okay, once you find something, then you make a list of what are the relevant journals. Then you scan through the index of these journals. Then you browse through their abstracts. If the abstract seems interesting, you note the reference and you get back. Okay, nowadays you have a reference manager. We'll teach you how to use that as well. So at this point of time, you don't have to read the whole article. Just read the abstract, note the reference. Avoid reading the whole article because you don't have that much time, right? So just initially look at the abstracts. So the internet is a very useful tool. You know, it says it can be a useful tool in our time and setting. Internet is going to be very useful for you. Okay. Then what you do is you identify an area of specific interest. Okay. So once we give you that broad group, the superficial reading will lead you to identify areas with certain gaps in the existing body of knowledge. And frankly, for us in Nepal, we have a lot of gaps. Okay, so that should not be too difficult for you. Okay, because we don't have too much of baseline research. Okay, so when to try to fill up gap, it's very easy for us because you'll find that you may not have a study in that particular thing. So that should be relatively easy. So identify certain specific areas of interest within the general area of interest. Okay, for example, after a wide reading in the general area, urinary tract calculi, we may get specifically interested in risk factors for urinary calculus formation. Okay, now this is in fact one of the thesis of one of our postgraduate students. Okay, in surgery, this is what he's doing. What are the risk factors for urinary calculus? Okay. Once you find your area of interest, okay, then you read into the topic. Now you must do an in-depth intensive study into this specific area in contrast to the wide extensive study of step 3. So you always start out with a wide study looking at abstracts. Once you've identified your specific area you want to do, then you do an in-depth intensive study. Okay. So now you will look at the published articles. Okay. Then you can also look at personal communications with experts who have worked in that particular specific area. Okay, then you're going to carry out computer-based searches of medical literature, giving the carefully selected relevant keywords. Okay, keywords are important. You have to identify from your question what are the keywords. When you use your keywords correctly, you will be able to pick up the proper literature. By now, I hope that you are convinced that developing a research question needs a definite scholarly attitude and plenty of reading. I'm sure you must have heard me say enough of times, read, read, and read. So that's a nice word for literature review. Okay, literature review is a very nice word for telling you to read more. Okay. Once you have done extensive literature review as well as in-depth literature review, now you're in a stage where you can formulate a tentative research question because a specific item has now been identified where some work has already been done, but still certain gaps exist in our knowledge. So we can now write a statement indicating a tentative guess which we wish to prove or disprove. Now, for most of you, we will not be focusing on hypothesis. We just want you to formulate a research question. Okay, but I will also teach you how we formulate hypothesis. Okay, so most of you, we can just come up with a nice research question. Okay, so after you've done a thorough in-depth reading, risk factor for unit, drinking at least 5 liters of water a day prevent urinary tract calculus. Okay, in areas you could even look at UTIs. Okay, if you drink enough of UTI in the hot season, will it prevent UTI? That can be a question. Okay, but this is more of a clinical kind of question. Okay, but you can do something like that in the community as well. Okay, then you evaluate it for its suitability. All remember, I've just put here for you for examples for you to understand how we are developing a research question. Okay, so is it suitable? Is it doable? Okay, so do we have required technical support? Okay, patients, hospital beds if you're doing it in the hospital. Okay, now when we do it in the community, do we have enough of numbers? Do we have enough of families? So I will also strongly suggest that you carry out that at least 2 to 3 groups of you should carry out some qualitative studies where we're not focusing on numbers, but we're getting more of experiences, perceptions, okay, of persons with illness or disease. Okay, so it's good to understand that. So qualitative studies, I hope I will see some of your groups coming up with ideas for qualitative studies. Okay, will adequate number of healthy persons or subjects be available? Okay, do we have? Now, diagnostic therapeutic facilities, that is right now currently not too much, but when we do carry out research, we have to know whether we have that particular diagnostic or therapeutic facility available, especially when we want to carry out screening. You cannot carry out any screening in the community if you do not have a hospital to back up, okay, for diagnostic facilities as well as offer treatment. If there is no treatment, don't screen. It's not ethical. Okay, so screening should never be an academic exercise just for us to know more of how much hidden cases we have in the community and if we don't offer follow-up services. Okay, so that's why you have the ethical committee. It's very important. Okay, also, do we have enough of funds available to finance our research? For you all, for mini research, we don't expect that you will be spending anything apart from what you would be doing for just your research report. Okay, so we don't want to burden you with finance, but finance and funding is important during research, and therefore there are a lot of institutions. We have in our institution as well a fund which is kept for faculty to access, and so you present your protocol and you can ask for funding. Okay, or if you don't get it within institution, you can look at other outside, whether some research bodies can do financing. Now, especially for cohort prospective studies, you do require a lot of people for the follow-up, and therefore there are a lot of people who are willing to fund these kind of studies. So it's very important for us to know, is the research question pertinent? Does it have any relevance? Okay. Now, for example, attitudes regarding family planning in a rural community. Okay, this is a good research question. In community medicine, very good research question. But if you're a vascular surgeon working at tertiary care, well, they're not worried about it, right? So depending on what your specialty is, what area a researcher is interested in, that is what, okay, you will develop pertinent. So I want you, since you're going to do research in the community, I want you to develop research questions which are pertinent to our community, because this research, when we carry out, it's our responsibility to also convey this information. So whatever research we carry out, it will all be, you know, that there are female community, there are community of volunteers, there are health motivators who are accompanying you at least on your first visit. We've also taken permission from the Gokarneshwar municipality. So we will be sharing all our research findings with them. Okay, so that is to take care of the ethical aspect. Okay, so when we carry out research in the community, it should not just be for our satisfaction, but it should also have value for the community. Very important, is it ethical? Does our proposed research work involve a breach on confidentiality of human subjects? Will we be able to keep the information obtained confidential? Does our proposed research expose subjects to potentially hazardous agent, especially if you're carrying out an experiment? Does our proposed research have a likelihood of depriving human subjects of a known or potentially useful agent, especially when you have comparison groups and treatment groups? Okay, when you carry out experimental studies, ethical concerns are very high, and therefore we will circumvent this ethical part by just carrying out descriptive studies. And whatever information you get from the family, please remember it is confidential. You've gone there as a medical student. Okay, so you have to maintain confidential. Whatever is told to you by the family, you just don't go and broadcast it around. Okay, so very important. Okay, confidentiality. Okay, will it be possible for us to develop a system of obtaining informed consent? Now, suppose we want some information which is beyond what is there in those papers, in the books that we have. Then we will ask them, we will tell them that we're doing this. Is it okay for you? Okay, so we take informed consent, okay, which you have already done. You have told them that you're going to take the information. This is for your study, for your exam, and also that you will be carrying out some research, scientific research, which findings you will carry out and you will give it back to them, okay. Has the process been discussed in the ethical committee? Now, for your mini research, we have already spoken with our from our part, we have spoken with the research committee in our hospital, and they have given us approval in person that we can go ahead and carry out mini research. But we have taken them into confidence and we have got their approval. Okay. But for those of you, once your research is done and you're interested in it, and maybe you would want to publish it when you become an intern, then we will facilitate your getting an approval from the ethical committee. Okay, in Nepal Medical. So we have an IRC, Institutional Research Committee, and we will see that you get an ethical committee. We will back you up so that you're able to get it then. And then only after you get the proper clearance from them can you publish the results. Okay, so right now you cannot publish this in articles without our permission. Okay, because this has been done for you through the institution. This is for you, to help you to know that very ethical aspect is very important. Okay. Now you have a research hypothesis and a null hypothesis. Now when the research question, when expressed in a statement form, becomes the research hypothesis, okay, rather than an interrogative form, okay. So research hypothesis, drinking 5 liters of water can reduce the risk of renal stone formation by 25% among young physically active males in tropical climate after duly considering, can you see, it's a huge thing. Confounding effects of primary renal disease, dietary factors, racial background, hypercalciuria, hyperoxaluria, and hyper. Okay, so you're putting a research hypothesis. So when you do research hypothesis testing, you have to be very specific. Okay, you have to know what are your confounding factors. Even if you don't put in a hypothesis, you have to know this is so that when you design your study, that you're taking care of all of this. Okay, the research hypothesis is a guess which we wish to test and finally accept or reject in our proposed research work. Okay, in your current setting, mini research, I don't really see many of you doing, but we can look at whether we can do a case control study. Okay, and then we will look at generating a hypothesis. Okay, the null hypothesis is nothing but it's simply the research hypothesis stated in a negative manner. Okay, So we said that null hypothesis, we stated our research hypothesis, which is your research question in a form of a statement. When you say it does not have any effect, that means null hypothesis. There is no. So the simple way of putting a null hypothesis, there is no association between drinking water and renal stones. When you say that, that's null hypothesis. Okay. This is just to show you the relationship between the research question, hypothesis, and study objectives. So this is a paper by Warden, Metcalf, and Kiss, and they looked at low intensity pulsed ultrasound for chronic patellar tendinopathy, and this was an RCT. Okay, so this was a randomized double-blind placebo-controlled trial. Okay, so this was in the Journal of Rheumatology. Look at the reference and the way which they have quoted. This is the journal. This is Rheumatology, and this was published in 2008. Okay, and the volume is 47 and 460. These are the pages in which. Okay, so it's very important. You must know how to quote your reference. So referencing is also important when you do research methodology. And this is the research question. How does this lipase, how does it compare with a placebo to manage symptoms of persons who have patellar tendinopathy? Okay, so what was their research hypothesis? If patients receive daily active lipase treatment for 12 weeks, their pain levels will be reduced. That was their research hypothesis. Okay, and their objective was to investigate the efficacy, clinical efficacy of lipase in the management of persons with this tendinopathy, right? So this is just to show you what this is the name of the study. This is the research question. This is hypothesis, and this is the objective. Okay, so that is how it is. Because you're just learning to start out, you will have all of these questions. When you begin to do it, you will do it. Please come back to us, as well as your mentors that we assign to you. I'm available to each group, even if I cannot be assigned to each group. I'm available for advice for each group. Okay. Okay, and then you have to have aims, objectives. Primary objective should be coupled with hypothesis, and it's called as the aim of the study. We have our research protocol in which we have general objective and specific objective. Okay, so our general objective is our study title in a statement form. Action form becomes our general objective, and then your specific objectives become how we break down, how you're going to achieve your general objective will become. So study objectives will define the specific things that you want to do in the study. Okay. It's very important now that you understood what's a research question, that it's your research question will then help you to decide what is the appropriate research design. So selection of the correct design is a vital issue in epidemiological research, and therefore you have to know what you want to do. You have to understand your research question very thoroughly. Okay. So for any research question, there is one most suited design. Okay. So there are different designs. You have descriptive studies, you have case control, cohort, cross-sectional studies, you have experimental, diagnostic. What you want to do depends on what is the question that you are asking. Okay. Then we come to evidence-based medicine. Okay, so what I'll do is now I have already come here. I'll just go through this, but I will take a class for you separately on at the end of the thing on a systematic review and as well as meta-analysis. Today, I will just introduce evidence-based medicine to you because I can see that I have 5 minutes more. Okay. So evidence-based medicine is a modern term for application of clinical epidemiology to the care of patients. We want to formulate specific answerable questions. You want to find best available research pertaining to the questions. You want to judge the evidence for its validity, and then you want to integrate critical appraisal with the clinical expertise. Okay, so the experience of the doctor, as well as you have to consider the patient's understanding. That's very important. In our part of the world, this is a very neglected area. We don't ask the patient as to what they know. We don't give them enough information and what they want. We think that we have all the knowledge, the doctors have all the knowledge and they just want to do a download. Okay, we know everything and this is what you do. You have this, you do this 10 things to do. Okay, rather than working with the patient. I can understand that there is a lot of understanding than the doctor, but you have to work with the patient. Okay. So levels of evidence were first published in Canada. Okay, so the Canadian Task Force, they are the first people who came up with this level of evidence. Okay, so it was very simple then. You had 4 levels of evidence. Can you see the 3 levels of evidence? Can you see the thing? The bottom is expert opinion. So MD general medicine, endocrinologist, diabetologist, community medicine consultant, whatever you may be, expert opinion is level 3 evidence. Okay. Level 2 is time series comparison studies, control studies. Okay. Uncontrolled. Then you have level 2, which was well-designed case control or cohort. And level 1 was RCT. So this was the initial one. Okay. So what you can see is when levels of evidence first began coming into an understanding, and you can see this report, it was in 1979. So it was only then, around 40 years ago when they began talking about evidence being produced for decision making in healthcare. Okay, so very simple. The gold standard was an RCT. Then you have below it a case control or cohort study. Then you have your case series. Okay, all your descriptive studies or your studies which don't have a comparison group, and then expert opinion. Okay, so expert opinion is always at the bottom of the level of evidence. So it's not enough to be technically qualified in your area. You also have to read and you have to get evidence from there for patient care. Okay. So this is what they produce for prognostic studies. Okay, you can see there is level of evidence. This is from the American Society of Plastic Surgeons. You have 5 levels of evidence. How many ever levels you may have, bottom of the pile will be expert opinion. Then you have case series. Then you have a case control, systematic review of case control studies. Then you have cohort studies or untreated, and then you have a high quality cohort study. So if you want to know prognostic studies, especially for cancer, how they are going to do, so you're looking at survival, then prospective cohort studies will be the level 1. Okay. Now this is the Center for Evidence-Based Medicine. Okay, and this is a more recent. Now you can see now we have increased. Now our understanding has increased. So we have more levels. We have levels of it. Now there are 5 levels. Again, look at the bottom level. Expert opinion is at the bottom. Okay, so expert opinion is bottom of the pyramid. Top of the pyramid, now see how it has changed. It's become a systematic review. And therefore, we need to understand what is systematic review, what is meta-analysis. Okay, and your RCT has gone down below. So RCT, which used to be the gold standard, is no longer the top of the pinnacle. A systematic review of RCTs is what? 1A, and RCT has gone to 1B. Okay, and you can see systematic review of cohort studies has gone to 2, level 2. Individual cohort study has gone to 2B. Then your 2C, you have ecological studies. 3A, you have systematic review of case control studies. Your individual case control study will go to 3B. Your case series is level 4, and level 5 is thing. Okay, so this is important for you to know this. Okay, levels of evidence. So whenever you carry out a study, what is the level of evidence that you're going to produce? When you know this particular pyramid, okay, now there are many levels of evidence produced by each association. So you pick one and then you go with it. Okay. This is the Oxford Center. Again, they have 5 levels. Okay. So anything that you see, you will see they have different levels, but the bottom of the pyramid will always be expert opinion, then your descriptive studies, then analytical studies, then experimental studies, and now you have systematic review and meta-analysis will be the top. Okay, so that is why it's important that you understand what is a systematic review. All right, so this is that. I think what I will do here now is I will stop the class here because there's been a lot of information that I have shared with you. If you have any questions, you can ask me now, or you can, write it and keep it and we can answer it for you. Okay. So thank you very much for your patient listening, and I will have another class which I will take once we are through with your whole module. I will come back and take for you critical review, and I will take for you systematic review as well as meta-analysis. Okay, and there I will again talk to you more about levels of evidence. So I know it's a lot of information, but I want to take away from this one is, remember, when you talk about research methodology, you talk about quantitative research, qualitative research. You should know about that. What's the difference between quantitative, difference between qualitative? What's the difference between the methods that we use in quantitative and qualitative? Okay. And what is a research question? And I hope that this class will help you going forward in the practical in what you need to do. Okay. So with that, thank you very much. And if you have any questions, I'm willing to answer your questions, or I will see you in the next class. Okay. Okay, Professor Lee. I am open.